It is.
Is that Steve Wozniak?
I think it is.
The great and powerful Woz.
One of the co-founders of Apple Computer. He and Steve Jobs
Yeah,
started
I know who he is. I watched Dancing with the Stars.
Steve Wozniak, best known as the co-founder of Apple Computer along with Steve Jobs. But it was the Woz alone who built the first personal computer, the Apple I, and later, the Apple II, the device that launched the personal computer revolution.
I said, hey, Woz, come over and meet Steve. So Steve meets Steve. And this is where it happened.
Apple wouldn't exist if it wasn't for Steve Wozniak. You know, I mean, that's just plain and simple. There were a lot of things that Jobs was responsible for, but Steve was the guy that built computers in his head.
We liberated some parts from Hewlett-Packard and Atari, and worked on a design for about 6 months and decided that we would build our own computer.
And Jobs said to me, I knew that with Wozniak's brilliant designs and my marketing skills, we could sell anything.
It was like, we'll both do it for fun, and even though we're going to lose some money probably, we'll just have been able to say we had a company.
I think what makes Steve Wozniak so special is he's just a really sweet guy that loves technology more than anyone I've ever seen in my entire life.
As far as Wozniak was concerned, the world was a great big sandbox with a lot of toys to play with.
He went on to become devoted to passing on his passions in mathematics and electronics.
Setting up classes for kids, giving them computers, giving them high-quality instruction and teaching them that. Yeah, there was something they could do if they had the right resources, if somebody believed in them particularly.
Steve Wozniak is the original do-it-yourself guy. The guy who figures out how to do something. Here's a problem. What do I want to do? What would be some fun way to use technology to solve a puzzle? And then opens it up to everybody and changes the world.
Original do-it-yourself guy.
The original, and let's give a wonderful, warm Warsaw welcome to the one and only Steve Wozniak. There he is. Have a seat. And this
audience, the questions and answers go left to right for them.
No, you're an engineer. I'm going to follow you. I think you have exactly the right order of things.
Just logic.
Now, I think in terms of just, there's so many people here. This is such a moment here. And I think just in case people don't understand this, I mean, right now, you're sitting next to the visionary, the engineer, I think one of the greatest engineers of our times. I mean, Apple, a company that's the biggest market cap in the world, but also, as we saw in the intro, everyone just knows that you're this likable, wonderful, easygoing guy. This is a wonderful, wonderful thing, and thank you so much for sitting down here with us. Now let's engineer this a bit. Let's Tarantino it, if you will. Let's go a bit back to the beginning. So where did this incredible talent for engineering come from? Let's go before Apple, before college. Did you just wake up one day like, I want to be an engineer? Is that your dad? Where did that come from?
Sure. I was like, 7 or 8 years old, and my teacher recognized that I was better at math. Little flashcards of math. I was better than the girls, and they'd never seen a boy better than the girls. So I said, oh, I'm good at math. What you're good at is what you value. And then my father was an electrical engineer. And back in those days, electrical engineers had mayonnaise jars full of electrical parts, They were all big and visible, unlike today. And I learned, so I started learning methods of connecting them, using a little welding tool called a soldering iron, connecting parts and making devices that would flash lights or make tones or do other weird things. And me and my friends, I was growing up in a neighborhood that wasn't Silicon Valley, but it was all orchards. No, none of the electronics business yet. And my friends and I one day just decided, let's get a wire from the phone man and we'll run it down the fence and we'll build these little, intercoms. And then we can press buttons and call our friends up and down the block. We were just electronic kids. Half the kids in my neighborhood were electronic kids because electronics was just starting to be a big thing. And it came from even companies that worked for the military, like Lockheed Martin, where my father worked. So I got very good at it. I became like the top engineer among the top electronics person among all my electronic friends because I was so good at math. I was in the highest classes in the high school, and they were generally in lower classes. But you combine mathematics with electronics, and that's engineering. And so I stood out. Now, today's a digital world. I built early computers. There was no way to learn how to make a computer when I was, 9 years old, 10 years old. No way. Except I discovered a journal by accident in the hall closet. I started reading it and learning about these little computing devices that could make logical decisions like a light switch. Up is on, down is off. Little decisions. And then they talked about how you could combine them to do things like add numbers in binary, zeros and ones, the way computers do. And I said, oh my gosh, I did it on paper. I practiced it. And I said, I'm going to love this computer stuff for the rest of my life. It's going to be my passion. If I had discovered crossword puzzles, maybe crossword puzzles would have been my passion. There was no way to learn anything about the digital world, the little parts that funnel electrons to make computers. No way. There were no computer books in any of the bookstores, not even in the scientific bookstores. There were no computer magazines, no way to learn this. No courses in school, no computers in schools. But I loved it so much that every time I got near something in a company that looked like it had information about computers, I asked for it, and I learned, I taught myself. So you become very, very skilled when you teach yourself. I was very shy. I didn't talk to people. I didn't socialize in school. I just went home and worked on things that I loved doing, worked on paper over and over and over. And that was just, when you do things for that reason, it's not like you take a test in school and good, that test is done, now you go to the next chapter. Oh, I kept working on it over and over and over again, especially in high school. I taught myself how to sit down on paper. You give me a manual that describes a computer and all of the pieces inside of it, the electronic pieces inside of it, and I could sit down knowing what chips were being developed. It was the start of silicon chips, the start of Silicon Valley, and I had manuals that showed me the chips, and I'd sit on paper and draw which chips connected together would make this computer. Why did I do it? I was never going to have a job designing computers. I was going to be an electrical engineer, like my father. I didn't think electrical engineers made computers. They come out of research in the military, and I didn't really think it was ever going to be a job or a career. I just did it for the fun of it. I just got better and better, practicing my designs over and over. Every time I knew what was called mini computer came out around 1970, the end of high school for me, every time a new one came out, I'd order the manual, get the manual, and then I would design my version of it. Then I'd go to sleep thinking, is there a way to do it in not 78 chips, but maybe 76 chips? Make it better and better. Are there clever ideas? And I started coming up with clever ideas in my head that violated all the ways you're taught in books. So I became extremely skilled with a head that could think things out and do things differently. And rather than, if you wanted to count from 0 to 100, I'd say, wait a minute, I can have some counters that every time a pulse comes, it counts 1, 2, 3. And I can look at the output, and when it hits 100, I'll say, go back and start over. Wait a minute. The chips came out. What I would do is I would start at, maybe there's a number like 256 that the counters can go to. And when they hit 256, they give a little pulse out. So I would load in 256 minus 100. 156, 157, 158. And when it got to 256, the pulse came out and it said, reload the starting number. And it was like it saved so many parts. I just came up with tricks in my head. I would never want to be like a normal designer, but I had no classes yet in computer design. There was nothing in schools, nobody to talk to, no friends to do it with, no teachers to do it with, no family. I just did it out of pure love. But when you teach yourself, you learn something the best. If your motive is to learn something, you'll go as far and deep as you can. Today with the internet, that applies too. But pretty much it's you're not doing it in class. In class is only the way to learn how a million people do it, not how to stand out and be different.
Yeah. I mean, you said that there's so much passion. You said you had really a love for this. You said yourself you wanted to be an engineer. You didn't have that, let's say, typical, let's say, profile of, oh, I want to build a huge company. And I think, tell us about this, because I think in the very early days of Apple, it wasn't really that you even wanted to branch out and have your own company, right?
Well, when we started Apple, I wasn't a business orientation. To me, business, high levels in business becomes political. And I was non-political. Has to do with a bunch of incidents with the Vietnam War I don't have time to talk about here. But non-political, I would never vote. That was one of my principles in life. And I didn't want to be those people that run other people and direct them and act more important and have power and use power over others. So when we started Apple, I just had this incredible computer I'd created that was going to change the world. It was 5 years ahead of the other people trying to build low-cost computers at the time. And it's because I had built their computer 5 years before, what they were trying to do. I just wanted something that was very human, that human beings could use and understand. But why would you buy a computer in 1976? Why would you buy a computer for your home? You don't do inventory levels. The computers were $1 million devices that the big companies had, doing inventory and hiring and things like that, and inventory levels. You don't do that at home. But you want a computer that can play games. Computer games were very intriguing. They were different than board games, different than games where you roll the dice. And my Apple II computer was the first time ever. Atari was trying to start an industry in Los Gatos, California, where I live now. They were trying to start the arcade game business. And they had the first arcade games like Pong. And I looked at them and I said, wouldn't it be wonderful if these games were in color? Color was hard to do. I was a skilled television engineer as well as a digital computer engineer. And I figured out a way, instead of working over, with differential calculus, to design color into a television for games, into a game. I came up with a weird idea that violated all the principles of color television that's in all the books. They deal with calculus-driven designs and sine and cosines, and I just took the ones and zeros that came out of my computer, and I realized if I put them on a wire into my television, the television would think they were color even though they were not. And I just thought that way. So this Apple II computer was the first time ever that arcade games were color. I did it for $0 instead of $5,000. It was also the first time ever that arcade games that you play were software. A 9-year-old kid in a simplified computer programming language called BASIC could make colored dots move on a screen and create a new game that was worthwhile in one day. A kid could create a game in one day instead of a skilled engineer with 1,000 wires in hardware hooking them up and spending a year on a new game. So that computer was the Apple II computer, and it was going to really set the world alive with personal computers in your home, computers you owned, not your company. And the Apple II computer was the only product that made money as Apple grew and grew. It was the only product that made us money for the first 10 years of the company. The business people in Apple kept trying to create new computers, and they all failed hard. So the Apple II, when we started with the Apple II, we thought, could we do music? Well, the amount of memory that would hold one song cost close to $1 million. Did we visualize someday people are going to have a little chip that has 500 movies on it? No, it was impossible to see. Some people would say Moore's Law would predict it'll happen, but you never know when Moore's Law, exponential increases in the power of chips, you never know when it's going to hit its end point. So no, we had no idea of today's world. That came much later in time, really starting with Steve Jobs and the iPod, and then the iPhone.
Now, you mentioned sort of tinkering around with things, gaming. I think a lot of gamers, not just here, but around the world, are grateful to you about pioneering the space, the color, amazing stuff. Now, there's also a bit of, you said you're tinkering with these things.
By the way, many of you might have played the game Breakout, where you hit a ball against some bricks, and the bricks disappear, and eventually you break through. You try to clear all the bricks. I designed that game for Atari, even though I worked at Hewlett-Packard. I was into
another round of applause, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, also on this idea, I think we hear about Apple, we hear about obviously your passion. We hear obviously with Jobs was involved in that as well. There's all this passion that's always mentioned, but I think there's also a bit of mischief that was involved. I know that you're a bit of a prankster as well. So playing around with things, I think that also played a little bit of part. And these blue boxes, tell us a little bit about this story. I think that's an interesting one to mention.
There was a summer when I had built my own computer with switches and lights for ones and zeros, the geeky stuff. You don't type on a keyboard or anything. And that was the summer that I met Steve Jobs. And he was young. He was in the same high school, but he didn't have the same teachers I had, which meant he must have been in the low classes. And he always talked about the important people in the world, and he wanted to be one of them, like a Shakespeare. But he didn't really have the academic background for it. And Steve was kind of, we had the counterculture movement going on in the San Francisco Bay Area. And so Steve was more of like a hippie, using drugs and carrying a little seeds around and that. And I didn't need to. I had a good head, and I wasn't going to use drugs, and I had lots of other ways to have fun. But right after I met him, not long after I met him, I read an article about a device that could make free phone calls anywhere in the world. It was called the Blue Box, and it worked by putting the right tones into your telephone. You'd hold up the Blue Box and go beep, 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 some weird tones that it made, and it would dial free calls. And that was fiction. The article was fiction in my mind. And then I called up Steve Jobs halfway through the article. I started reading it to him, and I said, these engineers that are setting up networks around the country and a payphone and doing all this stuff is so intriguing. I said, there's one problem. It sounds too real. And we drove down quickly to the one place that had a big technical library. The highest level physics research place in the world then was Stanford Linear Accelerator Center, SLAC. But the smartest people in the world don't lock doors. I knew this well. We'd drive down on a Sunday. You'd always find at least one door open in the main building, go up to their technical library, and we started searching books, and we found a phone company book, and it verified what was in the article. This was possible. Make a tones, and you can make free calls. And so eventually I designed a great little digital blue box, it was called. And I could tell it make a satellite call to Poland. The only country that you could not dial into was country code, I think it was 7, then still is Russia. And only one time did I ever get through to somebody speaking a little bit. And so we did that. And Steve Jobs said we should sell it, and we started selling the blue boxes. And oh my gosh, to demonstrate it, we'd make crazy calls. So one time I called the Pope. And I said I was a dignitary in the United States. This is Henry Kissinger with Richard Nixon at the summit meeting in Moscow. I'd like to speak to the Pope. And they said, it's 5:30 in the morning. He's still asleep. I said, I'll call back in an hour. And an hour later, I called back, and I got right up to the bishop that was going to be the translator, and he had spoken to the real Henry Kissinger. So I didn't quite get to the Pope, but I sure gave it a good try. Well, I was just going to make a confession.
But I think that's also part of this amazing talent that you've always brought. You also have fun with this. It wasn't really about just always making money, right?
Everything in life, I said, everything you do that's productive, like work, you should include elements of fun, being able to joke about it and put funny things into it and talk to your friends. And,
so, speaking of this, I think there's even, I want to get into a bit of engineering nitty-gritty. There's a certain formula that I hope you can help us here with. So it's H equals S minus F. Now, I think this is another brainchild of yours. So tell us about this formula here. And there's another Berkeley formula, I think, that changed, which adds a little bit of a different thing there.
Yes. I was about 17, and I was thinking out, like a lot of people don't. I was shy. I didn't have friends. I didn't socialize. And I'd be walking along, going home from school, and I thought, what kind of person do I want to be? How do you program yourself to be a good person? What should you do in certain situations? And I read an article about a guy named Sumner Redstone that was selling and buying $50 million companies. That's like $500 million companies today. Buying and selling them. And he was just so rich and flying around. And I thought, would I want to be that person? And I said, no. I'd rather be the person that just talked about a prank we pulled and laughed with my friends on the day I die. I want to have the laughter. So I said, life is not about accomplishment, it's about happiness. And sure, being rich can make you happy, but it's about happiness, and my formula was feelings. Happiness equals smiles, things you laugh at, like comedy. Oh, I love good comedians. Minus F, minus frowns. Happiness equals smiles minus frowns. H equals S minus F was my formula. How do you get rid of frowns was even a harder formula to figure out. It's when things go bad, don't get mad, just go fix them. Be constructive. If your car gets dented, take your car to the body shop, get it fixed. That's just just a part of life. Don't argue with people. Nobody wins an argument. It's just a chance you can sometimes walk away frowning, and that's against my philosophy. So that was a really good one. Now, in a later year, it was actually after a comment Steve Jobs made to me, I wanted to have my formula and have more of the fun element. So I said H equals F cubed. Happiness equals food, fun, and friends. And food means the necessities of life, home and shelter and all, and clothing. So happiness equals F cubed. And I was giving that formula out to when my high school was putting me in their Hall of Fame in a later year. And I gave that formula out, and the students laughed. And I was all embarrassed. I had to go to the microphone and say, well, maybe there's a fourth F.
So on that note, you have this success formula. And I think also when I listen to you, this genuine also curiosity, the passion of engineering. I also know that during your time when you were wrapping up Apple, in terms of your stock, you gave most of that away. You gave that away, you shared that, which I think also my follow-up to that is, as an entrepreneur, I mean, that's not what you typically get in Silicon Valley.
When I thought out my philosophies when I was young, and I said that, life's about happiness, not accomplishment, not being super rich. I didn't want to be one of those super rich people that often take advantage of all the other people. They use their power, they use their wealth. And I didn't want to ever be one of those people that, had private jet planes or anything like that. And so when Apple was extremely successful, I thought, wait a minute, money to live on for life and 10 times and 100 times and 1,000 times. Why do 3 of us get that much money? Because our names were on a founding document. And I said, what about these other people that were there at the beginning in the Homebrew Computer Club when they were in high school even? But what they encouraged me, they liked what I was doing. It motivated me to design these computers. What about them? Why are they forgotten? So I gave tens of millions of dollars to 5 early people because they were there early. They were founders too in my mind. And I also sold tens of millions of dollars of my stock before Apple went public with what's called an IPO. And I sold it to employees of the company, and everyone that bought it got basically a house out of the deal. They bought my stock early, the stock went public and shot up, and they made a house. And that's just how I thought, that everyone who works for a company, distribution of wealth should be more equal.
Now, that's going to be, I think, I'm going to challenge you on this one, because I think as an entrepreneur, if we're looking out to the future, we see huge valuations, Apple, huge market cap, I think over $3 trillion now. How do you reconcile that? I mean, as an entrepreneur, moving forward, I mean, has that compass of being genuine, honest, open, has that ever come to maybe present challenges for you? Or how do you reconcile being like an engineer and an entrepreneur moving forward in this very competitive tech environment?
Well, we're in a different world now than when I started Apple, and even 20 years after that, or 30, whatever, before the internet came. We built products, and people paid money, and they got a product. They could put that product in a cabinet for 40 years and protect it, and it would be the same, doing the same things just as well 40 years later. But we moved into the internet and then the cloud-based services, and the business models changed. The business model was no longer make a good product and sell it for the right amount of money. It became somehow capture your users, force them to go through you, through the cloud. Even to open your own door, you might have a button you push and it opens your door. Now the button has to get to the internet, go out to a cloud owner that charges you per month, subscription model. Charge you per month, and then they have to send a signal back that opens your door. And if it doesn't work, what do? Where's your local backup that is so easy? So it's a different business model today that allows the big companies to get huge amounts, millions and millions of users or billions, and basically own them. If you buy something today that has a touchscreen or anything, buy a car. The cars are becoming computers, you know, and you'll learn that you don't own it. You can make settings on it, and overnight those settings will change to something you don't like. You get in the car, why does it always lower my fan to 0? And you know, things that you wouldn't have wanted to do. You don't really have control over things much anymore. And also, the touchscreen world sometimes is very difficult to use and touch correctly, especially if you get older and bigger fingers.
Now, on that point as well, you said that there's certain companies controlling a lot. You're saying about moving away to this more software model. The hardware is gone. I think part of engineering, right? It's hard still even today. I think for a lot of, let's say, VCs to invest in hardware. They prefer the scalable stuff, the SaaS models, etc. But also a lot of that power is concentrated in Silicon Valley, still to this day, including Apple. If we're looking at it, I want to tie it also to where we are here today in Warsaw, and this thriving hub of Central Eastern Europe, the 3 Cs. When you're looking out at that, I mean, in some ways, some would look at Silicon Valley as saying, well, it's on a downward trend. Do you see other areas now in the world, including maybe perhaps in your time here that you've seen here in Warsaw? I know it's not your first time here. Do you see now that there's more diversification of other hubs that can also share that control potential, share that innovation?
For 20 years, all over the world, I've seen people wanting to be what Silicon Valley is. Why is Silicon Valley the way it is? Do we have different types of people? I grew up in Silicon Valley. No, Silicon Valley is one of the most diverse places in America now because it's one of, out of hundreds of counties in the United States, Silicon Valley, Santa Clara County, is one of 10 counties in the entire country where more than half of the people speak non-English at home. They all came from all over the world. You know, especially a lot of Southeast Asia and Japan, Vietnam and Korea and India but everywhere in the world. So we're just used. We don't even think about people look different or even speak different languages. Silicon Valley is Silicon Valley in electronics because of one thing. Everything we have digital today is based on a little part that's like an electronic neuron. It's called the transistor. And the inventor of the transistor, Nobel Prize winner, one of the 2 transistors, flew to the West Coast and set up a company to make transistors in Mountain View, California, part of Silicon Valley. And he started a company called Shockley Labs, and he trained other engineers how to make transistors. And although he was unsuccessful trying to make a special kind of transistor, other engineers left, and they formed a new company called Fairchild. And after a while, Fairchild made and sold lots of these little silicon transistors. Today, you buy an iPhone, there's a chip inside with 60 billion transistors. That's how we got the world so smart and so digital and doing so much. But it grew and grew over time. It grew exponentially, called by Moore's Law. From first one chip, one transistor, and then for the same price, we learned a method to make 6 transistors on the same silicon. And then we learned how to make 10, 20, 100, 1,000. And it grew and grew up to now 60 billion. We didn't know how far it was going to go, but that was because we started. We had to start with the one transistor company. One of the inventors of the transistor started in Silicon Valley. And so that's also in later years. You hear a lot about venture capitalists in Silicon Valley. Somebody has an idea. They want to start a company, and they can go visit a whole bunch of venture capitalists in Palo Alto and throw their ideas and try to raise money. Well, the venture capitalists got tired of funding companies a 6-hour plane flight away because 4 times a year they'd have to go to a board meeting, fly for 6 hours, go to a board meeting, fly back home. And they got tired of that, so they said, we'll fund your company maybe in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, but you have to start it in Silicon Valley. You have to have your company in Silicon Valley. So that was a little artificial. It wasn't necessarily the type of people, but yeah, now Silicon Valley falling off. Everywhere I travel, places want their own Silicon Valley. My first thought is you can't look at what it is and duplicate the same things. It has to grow from the start organically, the way our Silicon Valley did, from 1 transistor up to 60 billion. But the world's wide open now. for company ideas and for some of the, you said software industry, but I call it more of a, I don't know, more of a business model where everyone subscribes, you get millions of customers, is possible because of software. It's possible because of the internet. But so these companies, they just, you know, they get so many people and they kind of trap you in. You get into their system and you kind of have to stay there. And that's worth a lot of money. They built good products like Apple always did. Facebook, what a great product to have groups of friends that can communicate. What a great idea. But to make money, they had to track you. Everything you did. If you posted like, you think it's a message from me to the person who posted it, posted the article that I'm liking. No, pressing like is sending a message to 100 advertisers. And you know, you're going to get fed advertisements tailored to yourself. That was not the start of Facebook. That's what we have to live with now. My data, but I don't get any of the money for it. My life, I don't get any of the money for it. So this kind of turned out to be the case nowadays. But it's not because it's a software world. You could easily sell your software for what it's worth, you know, and not trick people and behind the scenes be tracking them, learning everything about them and selling it.
So I can imagine then that you're not using Facebook right now, or Meta, excuse me. No.
I pretty much I don't use the social web. I don't have a Facebook account that's active. Sometimes people will send me little Facebook video jokes, and I'm able to watch them without logging in. Yeah, and I also pretty much avoid Google. I mean, the Chrome browser, even if you never use it, putting it on your computer, it constantly sends information to Google. That's just wrong. And everything you type, even if you use a VPN to have secure data on the internet, everything you type went into the Chrome browser and Google has it. No, I avoid Google. I use DuckDuckGo as the alternative search engine and browser now.
Yeah. Well, I think it also speaks to sort of, I mean, you are this engineer of our time, and I think listening to you saying these things, I think people will take that to heart in terms of moving forward with that. But I also want to touch on another subject here. I mean, it's a buzzword. We've covered it here in our lecture today as well. It's all about AI. And we're hearing this all the time. There's actually, I think, a letter not so long ago that you actually signed, including Musk, to actually suggest that we stop developing certain types of artificial intelligence.
6 months,
For 6 months, which is up, okay. So my question is this. I mean, there's a quote I found that you said, the first word, artificial, is right, and the second, intel, is not. So how fearful should we be here, and how do you perceive AI?
Well, my comment about AI, where the A is right and the I is wrong, is that it acts like it's real intelligence, like a human being thinking, knowing what words mean and the like. And that's false to call it intelligence and make us think it's real intelligence. When we started Apple, I had 3 years of engineering university work done. And after a plane crash, I called up Steve Jobs and I said, this is my last chance to go back for my 4th year of real college. Get a real degree. I didn't need it anymore. Apple had been hugely successful. So I went back to Berkeley under a fake name because my name was famous. And the name I used was, it's on my diploma from Berkeley, Rocky Raccoon Clark. That's who I was. Always put a little fun in things. And I went back, though, pretty much as a psychology major. I wanted to study more about the brain and, you know, deep, deep books on brains and memory. And I found out we don't know how the brain is wired. We talk like we do know. If we knew how the brain was wired, we could build a brain. Companies try it. They come out with synapse chips and neural networks. I was at a company once, and the engineers figured out how you make a brain. It takes 9 months. Good job. Well,
interesting.
Now, you might have a memory of an event like this. Where in your body is that memory stored? We all say the head, because the head does the processing. But we have no idea where memories are stored. We can never pinpoint synapses and neurons and figure out where is a memory for a word or something. We never have been able to. And I came up with the strongest statement you'll see in any book about memory, came up with it 40-some years ago. You lose two things between the ages of 6 and 10 years old. Remember, I was a psychology major. Two things. You lose your autobiographical memory of things that happened, and you lose your teeth. It's funny, it's 2023. Use a search engine and look up teeth and memories. You're going to get some weird answers today. Even for Alzheimer's, the tests for Alzheimer's are in the gums and the saliva. To me, it's wrong. There are memories in teeth, but you'll be shocked at what you read. But it's still a stronger correlation than any other statement in any book on memories, period. So this intelligence, working like a real brain, thinking about things. Let's say you're driving your car, and it's looking for signs of how to drive and avoid dangers, and there's always little human interruptions. Something happened, lanes got changed, freeway got closed down, and sometimes they'll have scrolling signs with lights on them scrolling about what to do and what's happening. The words on the sign, there's no AI that knows what the words mean. Your car can't do anything to save you. It'll drive you off a cliff, just like it happened to the guy the other day. They aren't, when we drive Teslas that claim they have artificial intelligence driving the car, the number of times it has tried to kill me and my wife, and the number of times we take long road trips, not short ones, not like 1,000-kilometer road trips, but more like 5,000-kilometer road trips all the time. My wife and I, we love driving, and the number of times the car does something, we have to be so attentive, and we say, no human, the dumbest human being in the world wouldn't have done that. And we have a long way to go till it really helps us, and we're going to have to change a lot of things, have a lot of corrections, but you really still need a human overseeing everything. And that's true of the other AI we're getting into today. You have things like Chat GPT. Ask a question, and you get well-formulated, well-written responses, at least in English. And I'm very sorry that it's not working that well in Polish. All these responses back, and, it's beautiful, so you'll hand it to your boss at work. This is the proposal of what we should do. And the trouble is, there's artifacts in it. There's things that are wrong. There are mistakes. There are total lies. Like it'll quote court cases that never happened. Also, AI is a tool that very bad people can use for deep fakes to trick people into getting money from them. You get a call from someone in your family saying, I need send me some cash right away. I'm in this country. Send it Federal Express or send it through the Telegram or send it on crypto. And then people do that and they lose a lot of money. And that's going to be amplified by AI. Now that AI can have deep fakes sounding like other people realistically. So these are problems. And okay, Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, says, the good is going to be tens of thousands, orders of magnitude more than the bad. I'm not sure how he comes up with that number, because the bad can be so bad. You want to stop the bad. Now, the people who started AI, Elon Musk was one of them, say that it should be regulated. A lot of the most key players that have won the top awards in the world for programming and the like, they say it should be regulated, but they just say the word regulated. And any company making AI says, we're going to be sure that it's good for people, we're going to take some care. I'm the only one who has proposed how it should be regulated. You want to hear?
I think that we're like waiting with bated breath here about this.
Well, I think to me, the most important thing in all of life is truth. Always being truthful. Don't make up a story just because it sounds good. Don't script your answers to questions. Just tell the truth as you know it. And that leads to good things in life. And this AI has so many elements that you read it and you think it's true, but it isn't. And it may not be, and it can be very false. It can be true, it can be very helpful. It can help human beings like all the computer technology. AI can help human beings do much more, much better than before. But where is this little truth factor? Well, I said, let's look at, whenever you get something from AI, you should be told, this came from AI. Some places are starting to do that for us online. But you should be told what AI it is. And what was that particular AI? They're all different. What was that one trained on? What sources on the internet that were created by humans is it pulling out and then reporting to you? It's not creating anything. It's just assembling things that are already created by humans.
Kind of like a food label then for all
so
this.
you should know that. You should have a right to know where it was. You should also have a right to know for this particular topic, what was the exact question asked of the AI, ChatGPT type AI? What was the question? Because you could change one word in a question and get a totally different answer. But more importantly than all that, read an academic journal, an article in an academic journal. They have to be trusted. They go through processes of peer review. They make sure that what they're saying is accurate and true. But if you read an article, it'll have dozens of little bookmarks, little reference numbers. And then at the end of the article, you go down and the reference numbers tell, for this sentence with reference number 24, and 24 says it came from here. They tell you which articles they got it from. AI should do that. If you have AI, you should be able to see little bookmarks or bring up bookmarks of every sentence it created and say, where on the internet did this come from? You know, where did you get it? And that's what I propose.
I think, I mean, it sounds great on paper and as a vision, but I think part of that is a struggle, I think, which is also really big right now. We don't really have this whole idea of collaboration with technology. What we're doing right now in the United States, different what's happening in Europe. China's doing something different. I mean, when you were starting these amazing, this journey of the personal computer, I mean, technology has become very sort of disconnected from different countries. Do you see that? I mean, that's a challenge in doing this, because what you're suggesting requires a lot of collaboration.
Yeah, it's because technology has been turned into huge companies that have so much money and power. They write the rules, even in Congress. And it's money versus humans. What's more important, money? Even what's more important, technology or human? Should be the human. What's more important, money or the humans? But when you're trying to make money, it's the humans just get, the human side gets left out because it'll cost us more effort and more work to do what's good. New technologies like AI have a great promise of helping us, but they have so many promises that they're going to cause bad things to happen or accelerate it. And when new technology like that comes about, we should be responsible and go back and try to formulate things so the bad things can't happen as much. Do any of you get spam? What if we had invented the internet with a methodology of connections that really made spam impossible, and we didn't have spam? We would have had to think of it way back at the start. And so those of us who signed the letter just really want, let's hold off and do some good things in technology. You talk about regulation like it's a bad thing. It holds companies back. No, regulation just says you won't do certain bad things. That's what it's all about. We have in the United States the Bill of Rights that gives us, freedom of speech and freedom of religion and all that stuff. But in our Bill of Rights, it's regulations. Every one of the 10 Bill of Rights, amendment to our Constitution, is a regulation because it says government shall not do certain things, shall not pass certain laws. Government won't do this, companies won't do that. It says what's right and wrong. It's just trying to stop certain bad behavior, not hold up companies, from what they're doing in the world. AI should be a big tool to help humans go further than ever, and every step in technology is that way. Oh, and some people are afraid, we're not going to have jobs anymore. Wait a minute, didn't we go through an industrial revolution? We still had jobs.
So I like this idea of all this sort of global Bill of Rights for AI and a lot of things. I mean, these are wonderful concepts, but I think we live in this day and age where it's hard to fathom right now. But also, I want to touch on something more where we are right now, because I know that this is, I think, your third time here in Poland, in Warsaw. And there's that special, I'm looking at your last name, Wozniak, that has Polish origins. So tell us a little bit about your journey here and how this has all come about and your impressions of this country.
Yeah, well, all my life, I grew up, I'm an American kid, but oh my gosh, I have this Polish ancestry. I was always aware of it, and I always told people if they asked, and I was proud of it, actually. Someplace in the world. I did not ever research my family back, much further than great-grandparents coming from Poland. But So it means a lot to me when I'm invited to make presentations here in Poland. It strikes my heart very deeply. What can I say? I'm glad that I'm a representative of what people with Polish heritage can do. You know, anywhere in the world. I wish I'd.
It's nice to hear. Also, in an earlier presentation, we had this researcher tell us a little bit about, I think it was 20% of a lot of the early work done in terms of AI. That's from people from Poland, from this region. So I think there's a lot of potential here. And I think that's testament to this wonderful region here that we're in.
Some great scientists in the past.
Yeah, indeed.
We were taught.
Now, also coming back to what you said, because like if I listen to you and you're not too keen of a cloud fan, you're not too keen on the certain business models right now for looking at software, as you looked at a little bit of control models. So what kind of technologies, if you're looking now into the future in the next 5-10 years, excite you right now?
Well, actually, all of the things being done on the cloud that I look at negatively, like Facebook, why don't they just charge you money to get the good of it that you really want? Charge you a certain amount of money rather than tricking you into not knowing your data is being fed to all these advertisers, you know, and it's just, you should have a choice. And then you could pay the money or not pay it. The cloud has a lot of good promises, you know, to help us out. It's just that when people get control, it's a way to make sure that everything you do on your phone, instead of just having a program that plays a game on your phone, very few of those exist anymore. It has to go out to the cloud and interact with others, and whoever gets it on the cloud has all your data too. Mm-hmm.
And also moving forward, I think looking into the future, I mean, you are, people call you the engineer's engineer. We talked about how you, taught yourself so many things, incredible stuff. So now looking at, there's a lot of young people in the audience, looking now at this legend that you are. Where is that new innovation coming from? How do we continue that innovation? Is that from parenting? Is that in schooling? I know you did some work with the educational startups. So where do we put that innovation in so we do have the engineers and we do have the talents for the future?
You know, it's not engineers. I was an engineer's engineer, and what I meant by that, it was around the 5 years leading up to Apple, actually. I worked at Hewlett-Packard in a time when Hewlett-Packard was not the company it is today. They only made products that engineers used back then with dials and everything. And even though I didn't have a college degree, they made me an engineer based on my brain, and I was designing the hottest products in the world. Little calculators you could hold in your hand for $400 back then. It's probably $4,000 now. You could do much better calculations than slide rules. And the $10 slide rules were gone in 5 years because I got to design these things. But I was an engineer's engineer because I was designing the products that engineers use, that scientists use. So, my gosh, I can think out the marketing is partly in myself and the others around me, the designers. Because we know what engineers need and what's good for engineers, you know. When you build something for yourself, it's great. Like I said, I was into gaming, and I built this incredible gaming computer that really started Apple and made it huge. Because it was for me. It was what I wanted for myself. Turned out a lot of other people like it if you build a product that's really good and not clumsy. Now look at Steve Jobs and the iPhone. Secrecy. If you talk about what we're doing inside of Apple, you're fired instantly. I agreed with that philosophy. And engineers would bring Steve Jobs a feature after feature after feature for the first iPhone, and if it didn't work for himself, wasn't easy to use and powerful for him, it was out. You couldn't be on the phone. He wouldn't let him go on just because engineers could create it. And that phone was for himself, and that's why it turned out so important. Look at Elon Musk. And, okay, he developed the Tesla Model S car. Why would you build an electric car large? Just build it small, an engineer would say. The costs add up with the batteries and compared to the prices of other cars, and you can only go around town. You know, maybe 30 kilometers, whatever, 40 kilometers. That's how engineers would think. But why did Elon Musk build this huge car that could go hundreds of kilometers? He had a big family. He had 5 kids. He had to fit 7 people in his car, and that meant a large sedan for himself. Now, charging. You can't do the same things with an electric car that you can with a gas car because there are no electric charging stations back then. He built the first 6 Tesla supercharger stations from Southern California, where he lived, up to Northern California, where the factory was. Routes that he drove a lot. It was for himself. When you build a product for yourself, you think of the right things that it needs. And in the United States, that Tesla supercharger network, there's just nothing like it. It's so complete, and all the others are trying to catch up now. So yeah, make what you want, and that's just one of the keys.
Well, you mentioned Musk there, and I'm just curious about the parallels. I mean, he's also that businessman. He's also a bit of that engineer. How many, let's say, parallels do you see with Musk and maybe also Steve Jobs and yourself?
Many more parallels with Steve Jobs for the way he handles the business end of things and takes control, and big success got to his head, in my opinion. And Steve Jobs to somewhat too. I'm smarter than everyone else in the world, and whatever they say, I'll just tell them you're dumb, listen to me. And Steve Jobs would do those things too. So I don't, as a person kind of now, I don't think I like Elon Musk. And as a car, Tesla is a nightmare for me. It just doesn't match my feelings of technology. Should work naturally. If you are human, have an idea, it should be intuitive. Intuitive in your mind, it should work. And that's no longer the case with any products, including cars.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's an interesting point that you mentioned as well, because when you're designing these things, they should be easy to use, they should better society, better our lives. But you said there's commercialization, this uber commercialization really has taken over. So, I mean, the question now is but is there any way to stop that? Because I think we've gone on a certain trajectory, the world we're in, can that change? And you mentioned also other browsers, can we even get another browser? I mean, you mentioned a different one there, DuckDuckGo, I think. But I think in terms of Google's dominance in every way, Apple's dominance in so many ways, what are the alternatives? Can we make alternatives work for us?
It's very hard. Maybe somebody will come up with the alternative that takes over from Google or Facebook. Maybe they'll do it here in Poland. Is it possible? Well, if you can think in your head, it's possible. However, the big dominance makes the big players very wealthy, very powerful, and then they can set the rules for the next generation of companies. I mean, they can afford to pay and bribe, all the legislators. So it's very hard to conceive if it's possible. I've thought of a lot of ideas myself on occasion. If this were the case, people would be free from the bad sides of it. But it's very difficult to do that. And yet you'd have to be almost another Elon Musk. You'd have to have a great mind and a lot of motivation and a lot of money.
Also, in your early days, you had this, I said, playfulness, mischief, but also passion for engineering. Now also, you think like an engineer, and I think you've changed the world. I mean, I think that's the thing we know about Steve Jobs, but you are that mind behind the product. You saw those pathways. You mentioned the lights, the circuitry, everything. Looking at the next sort of 10 years, the biggest challenges to our planet, where do you see more innovation that we should focus on?
I don't really think about that very much. The next 10 years, I think the products that we'll be using in 10 years, Moore's Law, 60 billion transistors, it's hard to keep making computers more powerful so they can do more things for the same cost. And I think that the handheld touchscreen device is going to last for many decades. Look at cars. Look how many decades cars lasted, and they were generally 4 wheels, a container. People got in them to do certain things, and they do the same things to this day. So there's some models kind of hit a plateau, and that's kind of what they stay for a long, long time.
Yeah, and also I think looking at the future, if we're looking at people who want to have startups, want to do digital businesses, what kind of advice do you have for them? And I mean, is it about having a salesman in your team? Is it about having an engineer? What's the right way to go about it? You have this experience.
To me, entrepreneurship, startup companies are the most important thing in the world. To me, they are the source of future wealth creation anywhere in the world, because they are starting up building things that didn't exist before, and therefore they're not just substituting, doing something else that exists, a better way maybe. What they're doing is they're creating new products that we use in new ways in our life, and that's new wealth. Also, entrepreneurships, usually young people, they think we can get together with an idea and turn it into something. We're motivated. We have so much physical energy and we have so much mental energy. And we'll start the company, and it's going to be the hardest work of your life when you have a startup. Just every night trying to solve another problem and staying up late and hardly sleeping. That's what startup companies are. But when you're done, if you're successful, you'll look back, it's the most fun time in your life. The harder you work on things, the more you see it as having been very fun. So also when entrepreneurs start up, think, oh my gosh, I have a great idea. I can start a company. It's business thinking. Well, wait a minute. Those ideas can be I travel a lot in 10,000 places around the world, the same old idea. What if this program just did this one thing for me? The trouble is the people who actually go down and do work and realize the dreams, the vision, take it and make it into real products. Those are the people that really deserve credit and deserve to have success. And that's where we get things like even Facebook from, somebody actually doing the work. So it's hard to say. But now let's say you're a business person, you go to business school. You're taught how to formulate marketing ideas and spreadsheets of how your company's going to do, how to make a business plan, how to raise capital. You're taught that sort of stuff. But sometimes you say, the last thing we're going to do once we get funded, we're going to hire engineers, whether it's in India or the United States or Poland. We'll hire the engineers last. No. Keep the engineers involved from the start, I say. You need 3 main aspects in a startup from young people, a brand new startup. You need some business thinking that you want to survive. You want to make money. You need marketing knowledge that knows what certain products are worth. What are good features, what are bad ones, which are complicated. You need a really good head for that, and you need a good engineer. And the engineer should be one of the special ones in the world that is not an engineer, but an inventor. And engineers are used to solving problems constantly to get things to work, and they'll come up with many more ideas for your product, for your new company. And I mentioned engineers. I was not an engineer so much. I mean, I was a great engineer, but there are a lot of engineers, and they're trained in the university. Give them an assignment, and they know how to find a solution for that assignment. But then there's inventors. In the United States Inventors Hall of Fame, I met a lot of those people. And they're all like me. They have a little idea pops in their head, and they have a laboratory of their own, and they pop into their laboratory and try to put something together, hook some metal pieces together, or write some software and prove that their idea could be done. And then they go make it, and they have those are the greatest inventions. That's where they come from, those kind of people. By the time your personality settles down, say 23 years old at the latest, 18 to 23 years old, your personality, you're either an engineer or an inventor. And if you're not an inventor by then, you're not going to be one. So sometimes look around and look at people you know that love to create little things on their own, not worth money necessarily. Invention doesn't mean money. And see which ones are inventors. And there are also those people, a lot of curiosity, a lot of seeking how to do things.
You said, startup life is tough. You said it takes full-time commitment. It's not easy. We always see that trajectory. First the excitement, and then the drop, because it's hard work. As you said, it takes everything that you can do. Looking at on your own life, did you ever have that moment where you just threw in the towel, wanted to give up, or did you just always sustain yourself? Because those were tough moments at the beginning.
No. I was so advanced in digital technology, this is hard to say, that any idea that I got, I knew exactly how to create it with chips and it would work, and I never had any failures in all of the days from the start of Apple till, at least 10 to 20 years in. Anything that I attacked to do, I just knew how to do it, and they all succeeded. So I didn't have any of those, I got to give up times or give up this idea. No, that didn't happen. In later years, it did a little bit. I like to do little small projects on low-cost computers like the Raspberry Pi. And I program projects on it, and not working for days, nights, going to sleep with my wife. And then finally solve it, and I have the ultimate joy in life. And I say, this is Steve Wozniak. This is who I am. I love to get to those endpoints and solve things and be happy about them. Have I ever given up on any? I had a couple of startup companies, And one of them, I couldn't meet my own engineering and cost and battery life goals for a product that I was trying to build. And I still think about it like every day of my life. Is there a way yet, as the technology, the prices of certain technologies come down, and pretty much the best solution along those lines right now turned out to be, in later years, the Apple AirTag. But yeah, I have, so sometimes the impossible you can do if you're Steve Wozniak. But sometimes the impossible really is impossible.
Also, I think let's go on that hardware question as well, because I think where we're moving into a lot of software, also investors want it, that's where people are trying to get money for, scale fast, quickly, fire faster, this whole credo we get from Silicon Valley all the time. But there are some wonderful ideas if we look at deep tech, if we look at biotechnology, if we look at robotics, etc. But if from an investor point of view, often they don't understand it, they don't want to invest in that. But these are the exact life-changing inventions that we need. I mean, these are the things that will carry forward a long time. So what's your vision on that? Should people continue pushing that? I mean, we need more funding in life. It takes a long time. Engineering is tough work, right? So how do you see that? How do you see the future of deep tech? Because there's a lot of potential there, I think.
In personal life and in companies, I just avoid any connection to anything with money. I avoid the finances. I avoid doing any business. I don't even know what I have myself. My wife does. So it's difficult to say, you know, funding. Apple was funded by an angel investor. Somebody that we spoke to, Steve and I spoke to, and told him what our ideas was and showed him demonstrations of this amazing Apple II computer. And he believed, he had retired from Intel. He'd made enough money with a stock option. They retired, he was investing his money and looking for something else to do in technology. And he saw us, and he foresaw, somehow he's the one who had the vision. We're going to be a $1 billion company in 5 years. And he said that, and I thought, oh my gosh, my salary as an engineer is $25,000 in those days. A $1 billion company. But if you've had success, you're allowed to talk bigger numbers. He was right on. He totally understood business from his studies of other people who'd been in business himself and reading a lot of books about it. And he was an angel. So he put the money in, not from like the venture capital community. And he gave us enough money to build 1,000 computers. And he really believed in it. And it happened just like he said.
Mm-hmm. So there has to be some kind of dynamic, a little bit of help, I think goes a long way, as you said.
Well, you have to be trusted. Okay, there's a book, my Bible of entrepreneurship these days, starting a company, called Fall in Love with the Problem by Uri Levine, the founder of Waze, the navigation mapping program. And it's called Fall in Love with the Problem. And through it, he discusses all the aspects, even having self-confidence, portraying yourself with the right self-confidence to raise money, to get other people to believe in you, to join your company, you know, having to deal with founders over time. And he goes through so many steps, and it's so readable that I definitely recommend that. And the most important thing is be confident in what you have. Don't think this is my route to have a company and make a lot of money. Mm. No, I'm right because of this and that, and I've done something different than others. Make sure you portray that way to, and even investors. And it has a big effect. If they fall for you, they go for you right away or not at all.
I think this credo, again, think different, right? This has a special meaning, I think, for you especially. Thinking differently as well. I mean, you left Apple, looking at the sort of mid-late 80s there. But there's actually, you've been pulled back, I think, into a bit of entrepreneurship in the last few years. I think there's a climate tech company that you're involved in. Tell us a little bit what motivated you to get involved in that and what that means for you.
Right. Well, I never left Apple. I'm the only person in the world who had a paycheck from Apple every week since we started the company until today. Small token paycheck, but it's a type of loyalty that I have towards the company and a lot of respect from the company. So I never really left them. I've always been under some employment contract to them. I could never do something competitive or whatever. So no, I just, I love the company. And what was the second part of your question?
Yeah, because you went into climate tech right now. I think the last few years ago, there's that company that you're involved in, based in Malta, I believe, no?
Oh, right. Yes, it's not necessarily climate directly, but there might be a university like this, and this company in Italy that I made contact with would go in and figure out how to change a lot of their lights and air conditioning and all that, and to be more efficient and save money on electricity, and some of the money would go to the company. They wound up making most of their money on carbon credits, but they wanted to do a new program of what they do, of making businesses more efficient with energy use. They wanted to do it with a crypto. And looking at the crypto markets around the world, we were going to do it in Malta, but I've become totally disenthused and we've severed our connections with that company. So that one didn't work out. I'm not really a fan of crypto, just say the word crypto. But if crypto is based on how well a company does, company makes a certain profit, the crypto goes up, then the crypto is just like stock. That I believe in, and that's what we were going to do. My concern about energy efficiency, does it save the world? I came up with a formula through a very difficult process. I've always been very environmentally concerned, donating hugely to forests and rivers in California. I sort of want to think that way, but I drove a Toyota Prius hybrid for 9 years of my life. And I remember sitting down once at the Science Center in Detroit, and I was seated right next to the chairman of Chrysler and the high executives from Ford and General Motors. And I pulled out a picture I took. I said, look, I drove 412 miles, and I still could have got another 150 miles on my Prius, and I got 54.1 miles to the gallon. And the CEO of Chrysler said, Steve, you can't beat the laws of physics. And I knew he was right. When you argue things from laws of nature, from physics, you're always in the right. And I thought about that in the shower every day for a year or more. What does it mean that the cost of a hybrid system is only equal to the gasoline amount you save? The cost doesn't save you any money. And I thought about it, and finally I came up with a strange theory. What's the cost of a car? The cost of a car is all of the individual pieces that go into the car, plus the energy to create them, to put them together. Now let's take one of those pieces. This was the breakthrough. Take a piece, a tire, whatever. What was the cost to make it? It was the cost of the materials plus the energy to make it. You go all the way down the chain, and it's energy steps everywhere from digging ores out of the ground. That's the cost of a car. It's a recursive theory well known to programmers. The cost of the car is proportional to the energy used to create it. And the more energy you use, double the energy use, you're going to double the pollution factors. So cost, GNP, let's say, gross national product, gross world product, everything we're making in the world, its value is equivalent to the energy used that we use in life around the world is equivalent to the pollution we're creating. And that's why we're not having a luck reducing the carbon in the atmosphere. My theory, I believe in that it won't be contradicted, but nobody wants to buy it.
But I think people are listening. I think you just need to continue saying. I think when you say something,
Also,
people listen.
Well, think of this. What if you figured out a way to make a product, this table, for half the price? Okay, half the price, half the energy, half the pollution. But what did you do with the money you saved? You bought other goods that were manufactured with energy.
Also, coming back to value, and when you said that you never really left Apple in a sense, I'm just curious. I mean, and just to calculate, because I did the numbers. I'm not an engineer, but did the numbers last night. That market cap of Apple, if we're looking at over $3 trillion, that works out to be, I think, roughly around $85 million that you would spend every day for the next 100 years. You know, just to get that number into everyone. And this man right here, I think, is a huge part of that success. I think that's just incredible that you're part of that. But what about Apple today?
All my Apple wealth.
Yeah, but what about Apple today? What's your opinion of the company now?
I admire the fact that Apple is into diversity. They express it very well for their employees and their customers. It's the only company of the big tech companies that has equal pay for women for the same job. Just it's a standard that got set down. I really admire a lot of things that Tim Cook does as a leader, understanding different types of people. And as I mentioned before, Silicon Valley is one of the most diverse places. Anybody you run into isn't going to look like you in Silicon Valley. And I'm glad for that we know the variety of the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And also looking more at future tech, because we touched on it already, cloud computing, AI. Another big one, which is very, very important right now, is also drones. If we're looking at delivery drones, if we're looking at military tech drones, again, we've put the fear element. What do you make of that technology?
I'm always for technology helping people in their normal lives, in their homes, like an appliance, a washing machine. You want to go out and just wash clothes like the old ways? Washing machine technology makes our life easier. Or at least we feel. The people were just as happy then. Now these drones can do a lot of good for us. And I'm for that. But drones also being equipped with some AI that makes mistakes and weaponry. Well, I don't know. I'm not a fan of that. You have to compete with the whole world when you're talking weaponry, military, and all that. So you can't just stop the drones. I just am a super pacifist from the Vietnam War. Please, let's cooperate. Let's be good. When I put on my huge rock concerts in festivals in Southern California, we called it the US Festival. We wrote curriculum for schools around working together, not fighting. I don't like conflict. It's one of the reasons I almost never talk to people. I never make enemies. I just don't want conflict in my life. The idea of drones, we're just going to use the modern technology to be more weaponized. Same thing in outer space with satellites. So I'm not a fan of that because I'm a pacifist. If my government says I have to go to war, you can shoot at me. I would never shoot back at another human. Just that sort of thinking. There's got to be a very, very strong, good reason. And in the United States, just had war after war after war my whole life, and none of them were worth anything to Americans. I remember once you'd see a big company, a big country like Russia or the United States attacking a smaller country. And there was a time in my life when there's a country that I actually have citizenship in now, a little tiny island, and it had 100,000 people. And the United States, under a Republican president, Ronald Reagan, took our military of the United States, went in and took over this tiny little island in 2 days and made them write their constitution our way. Just didn't like the government there. Why? That just shouldn't. So I'm very much against a lot of the wars that some people are for.
Yeah, but I think at the heart, you're this engineer, you want to, better our planet and how we engage with ourselves, with each other, with technology. I think that just deserves so much credit. I want to ask you so many more things, but I think we're wrapping up here on time. So do we have we have time for one question here really quick? I think one lucky person, one question. I think I saw a hand
Maybe
up.
If they run up, they can get a microphone.
Yeah, we're gonna give them a microphone. So I don't know I think I saw a hand come up here, maybe in the front over here. So this gentleman with the jacket. They'll bring him a microphone. Yeah, over here, the first row there. Just one question.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wozniak. I wanted to ask, because I'm an entrepreneur, young, still getting into, I'm interested in climate change. I actually want to dedicate my life into climate change. I wanted to ask, how can entrepreneurs focus on encouraging it to be moving to the goal of sustainability, but also with the issue of consumerism in the world, like capitalism and that issue? What would you advise for entrepreneurs to encourage this focus into moving more into a sustainable lifestyle for the planet?
Yes, 1 million people want the same thing. When you have an idea and it's complete and how to do it and how much it will cost and how much it will make and that it will be profitable. Sometimes a lot of ideas say there's a new technology for batteries, but it'll never be into manufacturing to where it can really be profitable and used. You'll know it when you get there, but you should hopefully have elements of friends you're around that cover the three pillars I mentioned. Business, which you probably want, marketing, knowing the answers to those questions about what it's worth, and engineering that knows how to actually build it, or is good at making things, good at inventing, and then when you have it, and propose it and get people behind you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for inspiring us all.
Yeah, thank you. And I think also having fun, I think that was also a really key point to the formula. All right, I think we'll have to continue now our session here. I know there's many, many questions, but I think it's just been an absolute honor having you here, sharing your insights. Let's give it up for Steve Wozniak one more time.
Thank you, thank you. I am so honored, and I am so glad to be here in Poland.